Marcus Kane had 3 seconds to decide which alien sister would determine humanity's fate. But the real question wasn't who he'd choose. It was whether he'd survive long enough to make that choice at all. The crystalline halls of the Varathian War Academy echoed with the whispers of 100 cadets, all eyes fixed on him as Commander Zylara stood to his left, her silver skin gleaming under the artificial suns, while her sister Nixara circled to his right, violet eyes burning with something between hunger and hatred. "Choose one, sister, or I'll choose for you," Zylara said, her voice carrying that melodic threat that made his spine tingle. And Marcus realized this moment had been building since the day he'd made the mistake of being stronger than anyone expected. It started 6 weeks ago when humanity's first diplomatic envoy arrived at the Varathian Empire, a civilization that had conquered 18 star systems through a simple philosophy. Strength determined worth, and worth determined survival. Marcus was supposed to be a translator, nothing more, but when the Varathian instructor KL7 brought him to the training grounds and said, "Lift what you can," Marcus had made a choice that altered everything. The gravity weights before him were set to what the aliens considered moderate, roughly 800 pounds in Earth terms. The Varathian cadets, with their enhanced musculature and denser bone structure, struggled with these loads, grunting and straining to complete their sets. Marcus looked at the weights, then at the instructor, and asked the question that would change his life. "You mean their limit or mine?" The silence that followed was absolute. KL7's 3 eyes widened in what Marcus would later learn was the Varathian expression for shock mixed with anticipation. "Yours," the instructor finally said, and Marcus could hear the challenge in that single word. He approached the gravity console and adjusted it himself, pushing the settings to maximum, 3,000 pounds of force. The gasps around him sounded like wind through autumn leaves, but Marcus was already in that zone he'd discovered during his years as an underground strongman competitor on Earth. That place where pain became irrelevant and physics became personal. He gripped the bar, felt the weight trying to pull him through the floor, and lifted. Not just lifted, pressed it overhead like he was claiming victory over gravity itself. He completed 10 repetitions before setting it down with a gentleness that seemed to disturb the Varathians more than the feat itself. That was when he first saw her, Zylara standing at the observation deck above, her commander's insignia glinting like a constellation against her chest. She wasn't smiling, but her lips parted slightly, and in that moment, Marcus felt the weight of a different kind of gravity altogether. What he didn't see was Nixara, standing in the shadows beside her sister, watching with equal intensity but entirely different intent. The sisters were legendary in the Varathian Empire. Zylara, the decorated war commander who had never lost a battle, and Nixara, the intelligence operative who had never failed to extract information from any species, human or otherwise. They were identical in appearance but opposites in everything else, and they both wanted the same thing: to understand the human who had just demonstrated that Earth's people might be more than the Empire assumed. That night, Marcus was summoned to Zylara's private quarters, a space that overlooked the training grounds where he'd made his statement. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're either incredibly stupid or incredibly dangerous," she said, pouring him a glass of Varathian crystal wine that shimmered with bioluminescent particles. "Which is it?" Marcus took the glass but didn't drink. "I'm incredibly tired of being underestimated." She laughed then, a sound like chiming bells, and moved closer. "We don't underestimate anyone. We test them, break them, and categorize them. You, Marcus Kane, don't fit our categories." Her fingers traced the muscle of his forearm, and he felt the electric tingle of her touch. Varathians generated mild bioelectric fields when experiencing strong emotions. That makes you either an asset or a threat. He met her eyes, those silver pools that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "Can't I be both?" That was his second mistake, or maybe his first piece of fortune. He couldn't tell which. Zylara's smile shifted into something predatory and passionate simultaneously. "You can be mine," she whispered, and kissed him with lips that tasted like starlight and danger. The bioelectric pulse that passed between them made every nerve in his body sing, and Marcus found himself responding not just physically, but with something deeper, something that recognized in this alien warrior a kindred spirit who understood strength as both burden and gift. They spent that night exploring each other's worlds through touch and words, and by dawn, Marcus thought he understood what this was, a connection forged between two soldiers who'd both learned that power made you lonely. But the universe had complications in store. Nixara appeared in his training session 3 days later, moving like liquid shadow as she approached him mid-lift. "My sister speaks highly of you," she said, her voice slightly lower than Xylera's, with a rasp that suggested secrets. "She thinks you could be valuable to the Empire." Marcus set down the weights carefully. Up close, he could see the subtle differences between the sisters. Nixara's eyes held flecks of crimson, and her skin had a slightly darker metallic sheen. "And what do you think?" Her smile was razor-sharp. "I think you're hiding something." "Humans aren't naturally this strong. Your species' physiology doesn't support it. So either you're genetically modified, which your scans say you're not, or you found something else. A training method, a mental technique, a secret." She circled him like he was prey. "I specialize in secrets, Marcus Kane." He should have been intimidated, but instead he found himself intrigued. "Maybe I'm just properly motivated." "By what? Glory? Survival?" She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could feel her bioelectric field crackling against his skin. "Or by my sister?" There was something in her tone. Not jealousy exactly, but something raw. "Pain, perhaps." "Does it bother you?" Marcus asked, risking honesty. Nixara's expression flickered, showing vulnerability for just a heartbeat. "Xylara gets everything. The command position, the respect, the war victories, now the fascinating human." Her hand touched his chest, palm flat against his heart. "I get the shadows and the questions nobody wants to ask." Marcus made his third mistake then. He felt sympathy. "What questions do you have?" Her eyes lit up with something fierce and hungry. "How much can you really lift, Marcus Kane? How strong can a human become? And what would you do with that strength if you weren't trying to impress my sister?" That conversation led to secret training sessions in the deep night hours when Xylara was occupied with command duties. Nixara was different from her sister. Where Xylara was direct and passionate, Nixara was intricate and intense. She pushed him differently, not testing his physical limits but his mental ones, asking him to lift while solving complex problems, to maintain maximum exertion while she whispered scenarios of crisis and chaos in his ear. "The ship is falling," she'd breathe while he held 3,000 pounds overhead. "Your captain is trapped. You can save her or the diplomatic documents that would prevent the war. Choose." And Marcus would answer through gritted teeth, his muscles screaming, his mind racing, and somehow in those moments of extreme stress, he found clarity he'd never experienced before. He also found himself drawn to Nixara's darkness the same way he was drawn to Xylara's light. It was different, less like passion and more like recognition. Nixara understood what it meant to be the one nobody expected, the one who had to prove worth through different means. When she finally kissed him after a particularly grueling session, it felt like falling and flying simultaneously, her bioelectric pulse syncing with his racing heartbeat in a rhythm that felt inevitable. "Don't tell Xylara," she whispered against his lips. "Not yet." Marcus knew he was standing at the edge of a cliff, but he nodded anyway. And that became his fourth mistake. For 2 weeks, he existed in a strange duality, Xylara's acknowledged companion and Nixara's secret confidant. Both sisters were teaching him different aspects of Varathian culture and combat. Both were drawing him deeper into their world. And both were, he realized with growing dread, falling for him as he was falling for them. The situation was unstable, unsustainable, and headed for catastrophe. That catastrophe arrived in the form of war. The Kreshtar Collective, a rival empire, launched a surprise assault on the Varathian Academy station, seeking to decapitate their military leadership in one strike. Marcus was in the training hall when the explosions began, the entire structure shuddering as energy weapons tore through defensive shields. Alarms screamed in frequencies that hurt his human ears, and through the chaos, he heard Xylara's voice over the station-wide comms. "All cadets to defensive positions. Command staff, converge on the central bridge. This is not a drill." Marcus ran, not toward safety but toward the bridge, because that's where Zylara would be. The corridors were filled with smoke and fleeing cadets, but his human endurance let him push through where others faltered. He found the bridge under siege. Kreshtar shock troops had breached the inner sanctum, their insectoid forms clicking and hissing as they exchanged fire with Varathian defenders. Zylara stood at the center, her command blade crackling with energy as she fought with the precision of someone who'd never lost a battle and refused to start now. But Marcus could see what she apparently couldn't. The structural support beam above was damaged, groaning under stress, about to collapse directly onto her position. He didn't think. Thinking was for moments that mattered less. Marcus launched himself across the bridge, grabbed Zylara around the waist, and threw them both clear just as 5 tons of reinforced alloy crashed down exactly where she'd been standing. They hit the deck hard, Marcus taking the impact on his shoulder, and when Zylara looked up at him, her silver eyes were wide with shock. "You saved my life," she said, like the concept was foreign. "That's what you do for people you care about," Marcus replied, helping her up. She kissed him then, fierce and quick, before returning to the battle with renewed intensity. Together, they fought, Zylara with her blade and tactical brilliance, Marcus with his raw strength, tearing Kreshtar weapons from armored limbs and using the invaders' own equipment against them. They were winning, pushing the attackers back, until Marcus heard a sound that froze his blood. Nyxara's voice, calling for help from the intelligence vault 3 levels down. Zylara heard it too. "That's a trap," she said immediately. "My sister would never call for help. She'd die first." But Marcus heard something else in that voice. Genuine fear and something else. Pain. "I'm going," he said. Zylara grabbed his arm. "You'll die. I'm ordering you to stay." He met her eyes, saw the fear there that she'd never show her troops. "Would you stay if it were me down there?" She had no answer, and Marcus ran. The intelligence vault was a scene from nightmare. Kreshtar infiltrators had breached it, and Nyxara was pinned down behind a collapsed console, silver blood streaming from a wound in her side. But what stopped Marcus cold was the Kreshtar commander standing over her, weapon aimed at her head. "The human!" the insectoid warrior clicked in translated speech. "Perfect. We were told one of you would come." Nyxara's eyes met his, and in them, Marcus saw everything: regret, hope, and a message. She'd known this might be a trap. She'd called anyway, betting he'd come because she needed him to see something. On the console beside her was a data crystal, pulsing with information. "The intelligence she was hiding," the Kreshtar clicked. "About your Earth. Seems the Varathian Empire planned to conquer your world next. 50 billion humans enslaved. She was trying to warn you and we caught her being, what's your word? Treasonous." Marcus felt the world tilt. He looked at Nyxara, saw the truth in her expression, then at the data crystal, then at the Kreshtar commander. The alien continued, "We offer an alternative. Join us. We'll help humanity resist the Varathians. All you must do is let this traitor die and leave with us." Time crystallized. Marcus understood now. This entire situation was a crucible, testing not his strength but his choice. Nyxara had committed treason against her empire to save his people, knowing it might kill her. Zylara was up above, fighting to preserve that same empire, believing in its values. Both sisters had shown him different versions of honor, and now he had to choose which version he believed in. "No," Marcus said simply. The Kreshtar's weapon didn't waver. "Then you both die." Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "You assume you can kill me?" The instructor had asked him to lift what he could. Nobody had ever asked how much he could destroy. Marcus moved, and in moving became something the aliens hadn't accounted for. A human operating on pure adrenaline, fear, and protective rage. He crossed the distance before the Kreshtar could fire, grabbed the alien's weapon arm, and tore it from its socket with a force that sent green ichor spraying across the vault walls. The other Kreshtar opened fire, but Marcus was already moving, using their commander's body as a shield, closing the distance, breaking carapaces with his bare hands. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't tactical. It was brutal, primal, and terrifyingly effective. When the last Kreshtar fell, Marcus was covered in alien blood and breathing hard, his knuckles split and bleeding. He ran to Nixara, pressed his hands against her wound. "Why?" he asked. "Why risk everything?" She coughed, silver blood on her lips. "Because you asked me what I'd do with strength if I wasn't in my sister's shadow. This is my answer. Strength used to protect, not conquer." Her hand touched his face. "I love you, Marcus Kane, so does she. We both saw in you what our empire has forgotten. That true strength is knowing when not to use it." "You're not dying," Marcus said, lifting her with the same gentleness he'd shown the weights on that first day. "We're getting you to medical." He carried her through the war-torn station, and somewhere in those corridors, he ran into Zylara leading a squad to retake the intelligence vault. She stopped dead at the sight, her sister in his arms covered in blood. "What happened?" Her voice was ice and fire. Marcus could have lied, could have simplified. Instead, he told the truth, all of it. About Nixara's discovery, her plan to warn Earth, the Kreshtar offer, everything. He watched Zylara's face cycle through emotions. Betrayal, rage, pain, and finally something that looked like terrible understanding. "She committed treason," Zylara said flatly. "By our law, I should execute her myself." "Then you'll have to go through me," Marcus replied, and meant it absolutely. Zylara's hand went to her blade, and for a heartbeat, the universe held its breath. Then, slowly, her hand fell away. "I've never lost a battle," she said quietly. "Never. But I'm losing this one, aren't I?" "Losing you. Losing my sister. Losing the certainty that the empire I serve is right." She looked at Nixara, still barely conscious in Marcus's arms. "I always knew you were the stronger one. You had to be, to stand in my shadow and not break." Nixara's eyes opened slightly. "Sister! Don't!" Zylara cut her off, but her voice cracked. "Don't make this harder." She turned to Marcus. "Get her to medical. Then you face a choice, human. The Varathian Empire will want justice. I'm the ranking commander. The decision falls to me." Her silver eyes were liquid with unshed tears. "Choose one sister, Marcus Kane. Choose Nixara, and I'll declare her a prisoner of war, transferred to your custody. You can take her and flee to Earth, warn your people, and I'll delay the Empire's response long enough for you to prepare defenses. But you'll be fugitives, and I'll be the commander who let you escape. I'll lose everything." She took a shuddering breath. "Or choose me. Stay. Help me reform the Empire from within. Nixara faces trial, but I'll advocate for exile instead of execution. You and I together could change Varathian culture, teach them that strength can be compassionate. But Nixara goes into the dark, alone, banished. The weight of that choice was heavier than anything Marcus had ever lifted. Nixara whispered in his ear, "Choose her. Save your people by changing the Empire. It's the strategic choice." But Zylara's eyes begged him silently for a different answer, one she couldn't voice. Marcus looked between them, these two extraordinary beings who'd both taught him different truths, who'd both shown him love in their own ways, who both deserved more than this impossible situation. "No," he said for the second time that day. Both sisters stared. "No?" Zylara repeated. "You don't choose?" "I don't accept the premise," Marcus said, and despite everything, he smiled. "You asked me once if I was incredibly stupid or incredibly dangerous. I'm both. Here's what's going to happen. Nixara goes to medical and survives because she's too stubborn to die. Zylara reports that I acted alone in discovering the Empire's invasion plans. I coerced the information from Kreshtar prisoners during the attack. Nixara was trying to stop me when she was wounded. I'm the traitor, not her." He met Zylara's eyes. "You capture me, put me on trial as the human who committed espionage. It gives you political cover, the alien infiltrator, not the trusted officer. During the trial, I reveal everything about the planned invasion of Earth. Public. Recorded. The Varathian people get to hear their empire's plans, and some of them will question it. You get your chance to reform from within, but with public pressure helping." He turned to Nixara. "You recover, return to intelligence work, but now working with your sister. Inside agents for change. And when the time is right, when the Empire's attitude shifts enough. He looked at them both. You break me out. We don't run to Earth. We go together as ambassadors of a new kind of alliance, built on honest strength, not conquest. Silence filled the corridor. Then Zalara laughed, that chiming sound, but with tears streaming down her face. You magnificent, impossible fool. That plan has 1,000 ways to fail. But if it works, Nyxara breathed, it saves everyone, humans, Varathians, even us. She looked at her sister. Together? Zalara reached out, took her sister's hand, then Marcus's. Together. Though, Marcus, you understand you'll be in a very unpleasant prison cell for potentially years? I've lifted heavier burdens, he said. The trial became legendary in Varathian history. The human who stood before the Empire's high court and didn't beg for mercy but instead challenged their fundamental assumptions about power and worth. Marcus spoke about humanity's history, its wars and genocides, its mistakes, and how Earth had slowly, painfully learned that conquering others only conquered yourself. He spoke about meeting two sisters who both embodied different strengths, and how loving them both had taught him that you didn't have to choose between compassion and power. You could forge them into something new. Commander Zalara testified about his bravery during the Kreshtar attack, his tactical value, but also his dangerous ideology. Operative Nyxara, recovered and stoic, provided intelligence assessments that painted him as a significant threat to Imperial stability. Both were playing their parts perfectly, advocating for imprisonment rather than execution, giving the court a middle path. The sentence came down, 20 years imprisonment, subject to review. Marcus accepted it with his head high. But something had shifted in the Varathian Empire. The trial had been broadcast, and citizens had heard a human speak about strength in ways their culture had forgotten. Questions arose, debates sparked. Commander Zalara found herself assigned to a new role, developing cultural exchange protocols, researching nonviolent integration methods. Operative Nyxara's intelligence network slowly shifted focus from conquest, planning to understanding alien civilizations as partners, and Marcus, in his cell, received visitors. Zalara came during official inspection hours, always professional, but her hand would brush his through the energy barrier, her bioelectric pulse spelling out messages in a code they developed. I miss you. It's working. People are changing. Be patient. Nyxara came during off hours, using her intelligence access, sitting in the shadows outside his cell and talking for hours about philosophy, strategy, and dreams of a future where three beings from different worlds might openly love without treason charges. Do you regret it? She asked one night. Loving us both? The situation it created? Marcus thought about the question carefully. I regret the pain. I regret that you two spent years as rivals instead of allies. But loving you both? That's the only part I got right. When you get out, Nyxara said softly, we'll have to figure out how this works. Varathian culture doesn't have frameworks for what we are. Then we'll build new frameworks, Marcus said. That's what strength is for. 18 months into his sentence, everything changed. The Kreshtar Collective launched a massive invasion, not against Varathia but against Earth, which they'd identified as the weak point in a potential Varathian alliance. Earth's defenses, unprepared for space warfare, crumbled. Billions were at risk. The Varathian High Command faced a choice. Let humanity fall, removing a potential threat, or intervene, saving a species they'd once planned to conquer. Commander Zalara stood before the council and made a speech that would define her career. She spoke about Marcus Kane, the human who'd chosen imprisonment to save both his people and hers. She spoke about strength that protected rather than dominated. She invoked the ancient Varathian codes about honor in combat, arguing that letting Earthfall to Kreshtar aggression without intervention was the act of cowards, not conquerors. The vote was close, but it passed. The Vorathian fleet mobilized for Earth, and Xylara went to Marcus's cell personally. "The Council has agreed to a conditional release," she said, her hand on the energy barrier control. "You'll serve as a liaison between Vorathian forces and Earth's defenders. If we survive this, your sentence is commuted to time served." Marcus stood slowly. "And if we don't survive?" Xylara smiled, that predatory, passionate smile he remembered from their first night together. "Then we die saving something worth saving." The barrier dropped. She stepped through, and he pulled her into his arms, feeling that bioelectric pulse surge between them like it had always been waiting. They kissed like the world was ending, because it might be. Nixara appeared in the doorway, officially there as security, actually there because she couldn't stay away. "We have a ship to catch," she said, but her eyes were on Marcus, hungry and scared and hopeful all at once. He reached out his other hand to her, and she took it, joining the embrace. For a moment, the three of them stood together, Vorathian. Electricity and human warmth mixing, and Marcus thought about that first day when the instructor told him to lift what he could. He'd thought it was about physical weight. He'd been wrong. The weight of choice, of love, of responsibility, of changing an empire's heart, that was what he'd been training to lift all along. The battle for Earth was brutal. Vorathian warships, designed for overwhelming force, had to learn to fight alongside human ingenuity and desperate courage. Marcus stood on the bridge of Xylara's flagship, coordinating between species, translating not just language, but intention. "Human ships are fragile but fast," he explained to Vorathian tactical officers. "Don't protect them like they're weak. Give them openings to exploit. Vorathian shields regenerate but need time," he told Earth commanders. "Draw fire, let them recover, cycle the front line." It was a new kind of strength: cooperation, adaptation, unity. And slowly, impossibly, the combined fleet began to win. Nixara led covert operations, inserting teams onto Kreshtar command ships, her experience in shadows becoming humanity's salvation. She moved like darkness given purpose, and watching her work, Marcus understood that her strength had never been less than her sister's, just different. During a brief respite between battle waves, she found him in the observation deck, watching Earth rotate below, blue and green and desperately fragile. "We're going to save it," she said, standing beside him. "Your world, our future." "Our world," Marcus corrected. "All of ours now." She leaned her head on his shoulder, an intimacy she rarely allowed. "I never thought I'd fight for another species like this. Die for them, potentially." "Love changes what you're willing to die for," Marcus said, "and who you're willing to live for." The final assault came when Kreshtar reinforcements arrived, outnumbering the Allied fleet 3-1. Xylara stood on her bridge, silver skin gleaming with determination and bioelectric stress. "All ships," she commanded across all channels, human and Vorathian alike. "Today we prove that strength isn't about conquest. It's about standing together when standing alone means death. For Earth, for Vorathia, for the future we choose to build." The fleets crashed together like metal thunder, and in that chaos, Marcus made one more choice. A Kreshtar dreadnought broke through the lines, heading directly for Earth's atmosphere, carrying enough firepower to crack a continent. Xylara's flagship was out of position. Earth's defense platforms were depleted. Someone had to stop it, and stopping it meant a collision course, a sacrifice play. Marcus was already moving toward the shuttle bay when both sisters caught him. They'd anticipated this, known him well enough to predict the moment he'd try to be the hero. "No," Xylara said flatly, blocking his path with her command authority and her body. "I won't lose you." "We won't lose you," Nixara corrected, appearing from the other direction. "Whatever you're planning, we do it together." Marcus looked between them, these two incredible beings who'd taught him different versions of love, strength, and sacrifice. It's a one-person fighter. There's no together option. Then we choose, Zylara said, and her voice broke slightly. Like you chose us. We take the ship. You coordinate the fleet. You're better at bringing people together. We're better at the suicide runs. We've both lived in your shadow long enough, Nixara added, a small smile on her lips. Time we made our own light. Marcus wanted to argue, to fight, to lift this burden himself like he'd lifted all the others. But then he understood. This was their choice, their strength to claim. Loving them meant trusting them to be as brave as he'd been. He kissed Zylara, fierce and fast, kissed Nixara, gentle and deep. Come back to me, he whispered to them both. We intend to, Zylara replied, and they were gone, running to the fighter bay together, sisters, rivals, lovers of the same impossible human, finally united in purpose. Marcus watched from the bridge as a single Varathian fighter launched, piloted by both sisters in tandem, their bioelectric fields synchronizing in a way that made the ship move like liquid lightning. They intercepted the dreadnought, matched its course, and fired everything they had at its power core. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. For a terrible moment, Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at the expanding fireball and feel the weight of loss crushing him worse than any gravity. Then, through the interference, a signal. This is Commander Zylara. Ejection successful. We're drifting but alive. Someone want to pick us up? The relief nearly drove Marcus to his knees. The war ended 3 hours later when the Kreshtar Collective, seeing their flagship destroyed by a coordinated human Varathian maneuver, recognized they couldn't break the alliance and sued for peace. Marcus was in the recovery bay when they brought the sisters in, both battered, their silver skin scorched, but alive and laughing with the hysteria of those who'd cheated death. He held them both, and this time nobody questioned it. Nobody whispered about impropriety or treason. They'd saved Earth together. They'd changed an empire together. What they were to each other was beyond categorization. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the new Varathian Human Cultural Exchange Center built in orbit between Earth and the nearest Varathian colony world. He was giving a demonstration, teaching Varathian and human cadets together about strength, cooperation, and the power of choosing unity over dominance. Lift what you can, he told them, echoing the instructor who'd started this all. A young Varathian asked, Do you mean our limit or yours, sir? Marcus smiled, looking to where Zylara and Nixara stood together, watching him teach, both wearing matching expressions of pride and love. I mean our collective potential, he answered. Alone, we all have limits. Together, we can lift anything. After class, the three of them walked through the gardens they'd designed together, earth plants and Varathian crystalline flora growing side by side, different but compatible, beautiful in their diversity. The council wants to formalize our relationship, Zylara mentioned casually. Create an official designation for what we are. A triad bond, Nixara explained. It's ancient, mostly forgotten, but it exists in Varathian legal code. 3 individuals united across all aspects, personal, professional, spiritual. She glanced at Marcus, then her sister. If we all agree. Marcus stopped walking, looked at these 2 extraordinary women who'd challenged him, changed him, and chosen him despite every logical reason not to. You're asking if I want to marry both of you? We're asking if you want to build a life with both of us, Zylara corrected. Marriage is just the legal framework. The real question, Nixara added softly, is can you love us equally? Not the same, we're too different for that, but equally. Can you carry that weight? Marcus thought about all the weight he'd lifted, physical, emotional, impossible. He thought about the choice he'd refused to make, the future he'd insisted on building instead of accepting, the strength he'd found not in choosing one sister, but in loving both. I've been carrying it since the day I met you, he said. Both of you. And it's never felt like a burden. It's felt like purpose. He took both their hands, feeling the dual bioelectric pulses merge with his heartbeat. Yes, to all of it. Forever. If you'll have me. They kissed him together, And in that moment, Marcus Kane, human, strongman, diplomat, and fool for love, understood that the instructor's question had been prophecy. Their limit or mine? Neither. The limit didn't exist when strength came from love, when three people from different worlds chose each other against empires, wars, and fate itself. The wedding was attended by humans and Varathians alike, a ceremony that blended traditions from both worlds and created something entirely new. When asked to speak his vows, Marcus kept it simple. I choose you, both of you, every day, every challenge, every moment, no limits. Xylara's vows spoke of honor found in unexpected places, strength that protected rather than conquered. Nyxara's spoke of shadows finding light, secrets becoming truths, and love that transformed betrayal into loyalty deeper than law. They bound their lives together under two suns, Earth's yellow warmth and Varathia's blue brilliance. And if some in both civilizations whispered about the strangeness of it, many more looked at the three of them and saw a future worth building. Years later, when human and Varathian children trained together in the academies they'd founded, when the Empire reformed its conquest doctrine to one of alliance and growth, when the story of the human who'd refused to choose became legend, Marcus would sometimes return to that original training hall. He'd stand before the gravity weights and remember being asked to lift what he could. Remember asking if they meant their limit or his. The answer, he'd discovered, was that strength isn't about limits at all. It's about what you're willing to carry, who you're willing to carry it for, and having the courage to refuse impossible choices until you forge possible futures. And every time he returned, either Xylara or Nyxara or both would find him there, standing in the place where everything began, and they'd lift together, not weights, but each other, their children, their civilization, their love. No limits, just strength in all its forms, forever choosing unity over division, together over alone. That was the real answer. That was the weight worth lifting. That was the choice that changed everything.